So welcome to The Real Build. I'm your host, Bill Ryman, your broker builder. And today I have a special guest coming from nearby Tampa, Florida. Her mission is to help entrepreneurs grow, prosper, and focus on their own passions. To do this, she provides high-quality legal services and education through speaking engagements to help businesses and brands reduce risk and increase value. Some of the legal services she offers through her law firm, DiAngelo Law, include trademark registration and consulting, intellectual property, new business information, contract drafting, data and privacy consulting, and contracts, licensing and compliance, investor agreements. There's a ton of stuff, much more, and we'll discuss this further soon. She speaks to groups of entrepreneurs, college students, military veterans, and other business owners regarding the legal considerations when entering the world of business ownership, on the importance of protecting your brand through trademarks, and about mindset required for success. Finally, she's been featured in Inc. magazine, which is huge, and been seen on the following news outlets: Bay News 9, CBS, NPR Radio, the Business Happy Hour radio show, 83 Degrees Media, CNN with Anderson Cooper, as well as being a guest podcaster on my show as well. That was a lot. Erica DiAngelo, welcome to The Real Build. How you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me.
I'm happy to have you. Happy to have, I think you're the first person in law I've had on the show, so I'm kind of excited about this too. Me and you were talking about, brand building and stuff like that before we got on here. So I definitely want to dive deeper into that too, because my audience obviously is a business audience. So looking forward to it here.
For sure.
So what I like to get started with is I want to talk about your background. So let's talk about who is Erica DiAngelo.
Okay. So typically I would answer this question by explaining that I'm a lawyer and a dog mom and where I came from. But Erica is not defined by what I do. So I am an ambitious, empathetic, considerate leader and professional. And I happen to be from, Sarasota, Florida, Bradenton, Florida, and do all the things. So I'd be happy to dive into the things that I do if you want to hear more about that.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. So I have been practicing law for 6 years. I've had my firm for 5. I went to law school in Miami at St. Thomas, and before that, I graduated from Florida State University. And so now when I'm not working on my business, I spend a lot of time on personal development, spend at least 3 days a week at the gym, although I'm trying to be better about that. And, hanging out in Tampa, riding my bike down Riverwalk, or I don't know, sleeping.
That's, hey, can't be. Tampa, exciting city to be in too. You got a lot more going on there than what I do down here. Obviously, a little bit more younger crowd too. That's another thing.
Oh yeah, I actually lived in Fort Myers for a little bit, and that's and that's one of the reasons why I moved. Is I was just seeking younger people, to be honest, and more action. I felt like I was just kind of in this little bubble where the young people were either college age, which were just a little too young for me, and then after that it was a lot of retirees and families, and at the time family was not on my mind. So I moved to Tampa, and it's about 4 years ago, and it's just growing so fast. Like even just the past 2 years have been such a huge difference with the Water Street project through SPP and Venick and everything. And I live right here in Channelside.
Okay.
My office too is in Channelside. So I'm like, there's construction outside my window right now. Like it's constant, but it's exciting. And there's tons of new businesses and opportunities and, new fun things to do.
Yeah, exactly. And more opportunities for you business wise too, I'm sure. And then you talk about personal development too. I'm big on that. What kind of things are you doing for your personal development? Now, it's huge, as you know, with any entrepreneur. Yeah. So what are you doing in that perspective?
So I listen to lots of podcasts and read a lot of books, but action wise, lately I've been really focused on trying to get a really good morning routine and an evening routine. I am not naturally a regimented person. I just, I do everything and get it done, but I don't like to stick to a certain order.
I'm the exact
Although,
same,
yeah, although when I find that I have one, I do like it, but
yeah.
committing to it is difficult. So I've been trying out, different morning routines and evening routines. I've been really focused on making sure that I, pick some things that I'm grateful for every morning so that it sets the tone for the rest of the day. I'm trying to make that a non-negotiable, although sometimes, since I'm not a morning person, that gets pushed aside. And then, sticking to my exercise routine is super important to me as well. Sometimes I have deadlines and I'm working late hours, but, it's a priority for me, both physically and for my mental health to excel as a person and a business owner.
Yeah, no, I'm exactly the same as you as far as all that. Trying to find a consistent routine it's tough. I mean, especially in the business you're in, the business I'm in, there's always something, an email or somebody calling you or something coming in at certain all hours of the day, pretty much, and even in the night too. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to keep that repetition and so on. So no, I completely get it. I'm 100% there with you on that. Let's discuss your life a little bit more. How did you get started in law? What was the reason you chose law over other industries?
So I was in college at FSU and I was a communications major. I was focused on public relations and I went back to Bradenton for the summer and I was working for a nonprofit organization that I'm still involved with today. And part of my job was to go to the court and advocate for some of these women who have been in jail to be sentenced to a treatment facility rather than being sentenced to more jail time, because as a lot of you probably know, it's just this whole vicious cycle. They get jail
Hmm.
time, they lose their kids, they lose their jobs, and then what? They have nothing when they get out. But what they really need is treatment for either mental health or drugs or alcohol, whatever the case may be. So I had to do that and I had to go to court. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. It's the same skill set, but I'm making an impact.
Hmm.
So that day, the first time I went into court, I went home and decided that I was going to go to law school. And I wouldn't say that's the first time I thought about it. I had thought about it for a long time, mostly just because, you know, lawyers make good money supposedly, right? That was my thought up until that point. But after actually getting that experience, I thought, wow, this is something that I would really enjoy. And I felt like I had an appropriate skill set to excel in that.
Hmm.
So that was the decision maker. It's kind of funny because now what I do has nothing to do with that. I don't even go to court typically. But that's why I decided.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's funny how things end up too. I mean, that path you chose obviously took you to where you're at now too. I mean, I've said my story. It's similar thing too. I grew up in construction. I always enjoyed it, but not. I never knew I'd be a part. Continue to do it. I never thought I'd be in real estate either, and be a real estate broker. But it's just life takes you there, as you know too, and it's crazy, and it works out. Hopefully, obviously, it's worked out for you for the best too. So I mean, and you in 2015, into the next topic in 2015, you founded DiAngelo Law, a firm dedicated to the advancement of innovation nationwide and legal protection of individuals and businesses. So explain this, why you went your own direction instead of working for somebody else, and just explain your company a little bit more too.
Sure. So in 2015 is when I originally founded DiAngelo Law. But at the time, the work I was doing is a lot different than I'm doing now. I actually worked for another firm for about a year, and I was doing family law and civil litigation.
Okay.
And throughout my law school journey, I thought that family law was the direction that I wanted to go.
Hmm.
But then when I actually started doing it, I changed my mind. So working in Boca, when I was in law school, I worked in Boca, and people would be fighting a lot about money. And then when I was actually practicing family law in Fort Myers, there was a big difference in the types of issues that people were fighting about. And it was just really draining. And I felt frustrated. Like I couldn't get the, justice for my clients that they deserved, regardless of how hard I worked or how good my strategy was, because there's just so many other factors that go into it. So it's really frustrating. But during that time, I was doing other civil litigation as well. And when I decided to go out on my own, which had always been a goal of mine to eventually have my own practice, but it just kind of happened quicker than I expected because an opportunity presented itself. And I said yes, and I just took the leap and set up the practice virtually. I didn't have an office yet. And I continued to represent a small to medium-sized business on a nationwide company. So I represented them in Florida, and I represented them against some major companies. And throughout this process, I learned a lot about all the steps that could have been done to prevent this litigation. Both sides are spending a ton of money, tons and tons of time. I mean, I was driving all around Florida litigating for these cases. And as I knew that would eventually dwindle down, and I got to a point where I thought about leaving law altogether. And it's really hard when you've invested so many years and so much money and time into something. And, when I answered the first question for this podcast, I started talking about, who I am rather than what I do, because I think it's so important to differentiate, like, your career is not who you are. And I felt at that time, I'm a lawyer, I can't do something different. And I don't think that's true, although I did make the decision to continue practicing law. It's because I found a way to use my legal expertise and my law degree to do something that I cared more about. And that's about entrepreneurship, supporting small businesses, protecting them on the front end to avoid all this nightmare litigation on the back end. It's not happy for anybody. You can be the best lawyer in the world, and it's still a draining, negative experience having to go through a lawsuit, even if the outcome is favorable in the end. So that's why I shifted DiAngelo Law from this litigation firm into what I do now, helping small businesses and entrepreneurs, mainly on the front end rather on the defensive side.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure it's a lot. It's what your passion is, like you said, and that's what's that. If you follow your passion, as you know, and as you've stated too, I mean, if you're doing something you actually enjoy, it's a big difference, and you're going to be better at it as a person anyway, And I liked what you said there too. We aren't our careers, and that's why I liked your intro. It was different than pretty much a lot of people I've interviewed. You actually talked about yourself rather than how you got into business and so on, and which is great too. But no, I mean, you doing what you're doing is awesome. And I've never heard the angle. You never think about the branding side of things. You never really think about that legally, I guess, until you develop a big brand, but people that are trying to do their personal brands now and everything, I would never, for your broker builder, I would never consider even thinking about talking to an attorney for that, but now I obviously am talking to you, which is awesome too. So no.
Yeah, it's definitely a big educational component, because most people don't think about that, right? They think about, okay, I want to start this business or this project. Oh, I picked a name, and now I need to figure out how to monetize, right? That's kind of the short version of the thought process. But when you skip the legal steps, you're just putting yourself at risk to invest the time and the money and the energy, and then hit some major hiccups. So that's why I do so much speaking engagements and educational opportunities when I can, because it's something that people don't think of, and they really need to know if they want to, set the tone for a successful business.
Yeah, and it's true. Like what you just said is 100% true. I mean, I started a real estate company, and the thing that I didn't even consider is doing legal for the brand and stuff like that, or any kind of legal. I just like, I got my name, got my logo, let's go and do it. But basically, technically, somebody can just take that logo, and whatever I develop, they can say, hey, well, that's my business, pretty much. You never think about this stuff too. Yeah, and that's obviously why I got you on here, because people need to think about it. So let's talk about the different types of law you do. Trademark registration and consulting, intellectual property. I named quite a few of them at the beginning. New business or information or formation, contract drafting, data and privacy consult. I named all these. Let's talk about these kind of individually real quick, and what different ones you're doing and what they are, so people understand it.
Sure. So they're kind of all intertwined, and they're relevant to pretty much any business, especially now that we live in this kind of global economy where the internet is the connector. And whether you're a brick and mortar or an online service business, you probably have a website and you probably have a brand. Like every business has a trademark, whether they understand that or not, and whether they have it registered and protected or not. Okay, so the name of your company is your brand, and there's other trademarks and stuff associated with a company. But the main practice area that we focus on now is trademark registration, and that is basically when you have your brand name, you have a logo, you have a catch line. Maybe if you have a product-based business, you have multiple product lines under the same company. If you're a brewery, you have multiple beers with different names under the same company. All of these things are trademarks. And a lot of businesses like yourself, you have a business and then you have a podcast as sort of a marketing tool or whatever you want to call it, but that oftentimes has a separate name as well, which should be protected because it is a brand in itself. So we do trademark registrations through the USPTO, that's the federal trademark office essentially. And it's like a year-long process too. So I'm not sure how far you want me to dive into how it works.
No, go, yeah, because this is all important. Yeah, there's no time limit on this show either, so go for it. The more information, the better.
Okay, awesome. So basically, the best time to get a trademark is before you've even started your business, before you're even gone live on your brand. And you can do that. You can also do it after you've started. But once you file your application, you're not even going to hear back from the trademark office for like 3 to 4 months. Actually, I skipped a really important step. When you're thinking about starting a business and you're brainstorming through names, whether you're doing this on your own or you're working with a branding agency, you should narrow it down and not get married to a name before you do a search. And what I mean by a search is not Google. It's not going on to sunbiz.org or whatever your Secretary of State is and searching, is that name available for the LLC? And it's not even going to the trademark website and searching on there, because only exact spellings of what you type in are going to show up. And there's the way that the legal standard is for trademarks is it doesn't have to be an identical name. It can be so many different variations. It can be a phonetic equivalent, yet spelled completely different. The services or goods that you're selling don't have to be identical. I mean, it really, can be different. More than you would think as just an average consumer who's trying to see if that name's available. So you'd want to get an in-depth search done up front before you decide on a name and before you start investing into that name. So once you do that, you have the clearance search, then you want to apply for it on the trademark, the USPTO. So by then you already know your risk, right? If you go to an attorney, you get this search report, you get a risk analysis and an opinion letter, you can feel confident as you start investing into this brand that you're going to be able to secure this trademark registration. So like I said, you file, you don't hear back for 3 to 4 months. Then you hear back. Either they say, great, no problems, we're going to put you through the publication stage. Or they say, sorry, you need to fix this. Or sorry, you're refused because there's another similar mark out there, or whatever the case may be. And basically, it takes about a year to get a trademark, even if everything goes smoothly as possible. Probably the quickest I've ever seen is 8 months to get your trademark registration. And during the publication stage that I mentioned, it's like a 30-day window where other companies can oppose your mark. If they think that it's similar to theirs and the trademark office didn't catch it, they can actually file an opposition. And that can lead to either negotiations and somehow distinguishing your brands from each other, or it can be a lawsuit, or you can just give up the name and start over. That's also an option. So that's how you basically go through the trademark application process. There's a number of hurdles, so you can definitely try to do it on your own. You don't have to have an attorney to do it. But what I would say is if you hit some of these hurdles, sometimes you can't fix them. You'd have to start the process over, you have to pay a new application fee, and then you risk the possibility of somebody filing for that name in between. So after you filed the first one, and it happens way more than you'd think. But yeah, that's basically the trademark registration process. The sooner the better. I had a call yesterday from a guy who he's got a fast food chain, and he has 4 locations, but he never applied for his trademark. He opened in 2010. He never applied for his trademark, and somebody else did for the same trademark in a different state. But now he's in a pickle, right? Does he rebrand? I mean, he's already built, 4 locations and 10 years of name recognition.
Yeah.
Or he spends a ton of money litigating this. So even though if he was using that name before this other company and he could have superior legal rights, it's still a very expensive process to prove it and force, this other company to give up their trademark registration. So that's the trademark registration process in general. Intellectual property includes that. It includes copyright. It includes a lot of contracts actually that protect your business, like your trade secrets and the lists, contact lists, things along those lines. It's a pretty broad term, and it sometimes gets intertwined with business law and contract law. The data and privacy consulting is really important and something that most businesses are also not thinking about. I mean, some like e-commerce businesses know that they need privacy policies. But most people at this point, smaller businesses anyway, are using third-party platforms for their websites, whether it's, Shopify to check out, whether it's, Amazon, AWS, I don't know what they're using, but most of these bigger companies are going to be compliant with the relevant laws. But if you're taking that information that you're getting from consumers, whether it's literally just a name and an email address, and you're using it in a way that's not compliant with the data protection rules, or you're not informing those people, you're potentially in violation of some of these data protection laws. So, so we consult on what's relevant to businesses, like each business in particular, and this varies depending on where their customers are located, what kind of data they're collecting, and what they're doing with it. So we consult on that, and we write privacy policies, and we do even some implementation for companies that need to become compliant with GDPR, for example, the General Data Protection Regulation, which is an EU regulation, but it applies to everybody because, again, we live in this global world. So you have somebody from the EU using your website, that still applies. And then investor agreements is one of the things you mentioned. Here in Tampa, we have a ton of startups, and Tampa is sort of becoming this hub for startups. It's not necessarily trying to compete with Silicon Valley, but, kind of be its own version of a tech startup hub. And that means there's a lot of companies seeking investors. So we do investor agreements. We also consult on formation. So whether your company needs to be an LLC or a corporation, should it be Delaware, should it be Florida, all that matters when you're starting your company based on what your end goal is. Like if you just want to be a small business and you want to have sole ownership forever, that's great. But that's a different concern than somebody whose goal is to ultimately sell, or ultimately maybe their goal is to franchise, right? Depending on what your long-term goal is, there's different considerations. A lot of people think LLC is the automatic answer, but it's not. I would say that's kind of a safe bet if you're unsure and you're starting a small business. Sure, it's a safe bet, and you can always, make changes later. But yeah.
No, I mean, it's a lot. And that's why somebody, should, like, I don't know who would want to personally do all that by themselves. If they're going to trademark something, they definitely need to hire somebody like you, because I wouldn't want to deal with all that too. But what you just said was a lot of stuff too to have to deal with on your own. But what's interesting too is like with podcasts too, because I know I get a lot of listeners on the show that have podcasts, and to be able to trademark your podcast brand, that's interesting because that's one of the things that you don't really think of either. Like, why would I trademark that? When you start a podcast, you kind of do the search through iTunes and see, is this name taken? Oh no, nobody has that name. I'm going to use this name and so on. But now I guess somebody can basically just take your name and start their own without the trademark and the legal help that you're talking about on it too. It's real interesting. And then even with the brand, like we talked about, there's so many little things now in this day and age that people are doing, especially in business, to try and make themselves stand out, whether it's video, podcasting, and all this stuff. But there's always a brand behind it too, and if you're doing your own thing, like me, I have a brand logo that I had drawn up too, and it's like, yeah, anybody can use that. So that's what's that's what's interesting about this whole thing, And then the investor agreements too. That was something that's interesting too. I didn't even know Tampa was getting like that. Also, that was news. I haven't been there in a while too. I gotta go back there and see what's going on up there because if they're starting to turn into a mini Silicon Valley, that's place is going to blow up. So, as far as
we have like multiple accelerators and incubators now here.
Really?
Yeah, one
that's crazy.
Months too. So it's growing fast. But yeah, it's not all about people being able to steal your business either. It's about your consumers potentially being confused. So, one example I use sometimes is if Sally opens South Tampa Real Estate Group and she's doing a really great job as a realtor and she's closing big deals and serving her clients well, and people are telling each other, go see Sally at South Tampa Realty Group, or they're just really saying South Tampa Realty Group, or I don't even remember what I called it. See, this is my point. So then somebody, instead of opening the same company, they open something very similar where it's South Tampa Realty, hypothetically. And the names are so similar that when people are talking, now this second guy who opens, let's say his name's Bob, and he's doing a crappy job, he's not responding emails fast enough, the homes are getting sold, their clients aren't even getting a chance to view them, whatever the case may be. And then people are just talking. In the minds of the consumer, they're not distinguishing the real estate group of South Tampa versus South Tampa Realty, or whatever the two terms I used were. They're so similar, I can't even keep track,
No, you're right.
So you don't want to be Sally doing a kick-ass job, and then there's Bob who's like tarnishing your reputation, incidentally.
Yeah, and they link. Yeah, the people are going to link Sally to Bob, and that's the problem with that too. And I mean, this is awesome. That's why I have you on. It's just stuff that a lot of people do not think about. When they go. And I'll repeat this over this show because I'm sure I'm going to hear a lot more stuff too. It's like, it's crazy. And getting into that a little bit more too, throughout your legal career, and I read this about you have guided numerous clients through some of their greatest personal and business challenges. So how have you done this? Let's talk about a few more situations that you've dealt with.
Sure. So I guess more in the beginning of my practice is the personal side, right? When I was handling different types of law, but regardless of whether it's a business challenge or not, it's still personal, right? If it's a business challenge, it's still personal. If you're a business owner, that is intertwined into your life. So if you're hitting a hiccup, like one of these trademark issues where, another example was just 2 days ago, I got this guy, he has an IT services company. He started it in 2001. He never got his trademark registered. And he wanted to get his Twitter handle. So on social media, if somebody has your name, like your business name already taken, and you have the trademark registered, you can contact Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever, and you can say, look, I own this, and they will release that handle to you. If you don't have a trademark, they're going to say too bad. So this guy wanted to get his trademark registered so he can get his Twitter handle, but a month before he applied for registration, a cryptocurrency wallet company out of China applied for a similar name. Okay, so IT services consulting versus cryptocurrency wallet, not identical names, but similar. And they got the registration. And so now the IT services company was refused registration. So now 19 years later, they're forced to either rebrand or, have me help them through this process and hopefully be able to get their, the brand name secured and, not refused. And hopefully this China company doesn't ask them to stop using it. And I guess that's a future focused example. But these are the types of business challenges that I help clients with on a regular basis. I have done a lot of the disputes in the past, but like I spoke about earlier, is my focus is now on the front end, helping you avoid these challenges, right? I don't even want you to have to go through this. I want you to get it done right from the beginning.
No, and I mean, going off of that too, and that kind of goes into my next question with you. So, I mean, you deal with a lot of business owners, and you have said you're here to defend entrepreneurs. So, what are you doing, and what should someone look for? Let's say if they're starting a business or a personal brand, how should they go about, going through the process with you or another attorney?
Well, I think the first step is literally getting a consult because you don't know what you don't know, right? And I think that a lot of people listening will recognize that. They probably never even thought about getting their trademark registered. They probably haven't considered too much about, do they have the appropriate contracts in place? And in the beginning, people want to be really optimistic and they're starting a business, and sometimes they have a partner too, and it's a friend or family member, and like, yeah, you guys are going to crush it together. But so you don't get a partnership agreement in place. Well, people's interests change over time. And sometimes, there's two sides to every story, and you can both be right. And you can both have, good faith in mind, but you're still disputing something. So that's why it's nice to have a contract in place that's going to resolve the issue for you rather than a judge, or rather than just having this animosity and ruining a relationship, right? So that's what that contract would be for. And every business is so situational. There's different concerns for every industry, for every brand, just depending on, your goals and the structure. So I just think becoming aware of what you don't know is the first step. Of course, a lot of people don't skip the step of talking to a CPA because they see, okay, I'm going to have to pay taxes. I want to pay as little as possible, right? So they see that. But with law, especially the type of law I do on the more preventative side, you're not really even going to realize how important it is until a situation comes up where it would have been a lawsuit if you didn't have it, right? Like that's when you really see the value. But, alternatively, for these companies who are trying to franchise or trying to sell a business, and that's their goal, like all your intellectual property at this day and age is most businesses' most valuable asset now. Okay, because that's how you're differentiating yourself as a brand, is your IP. Now, there are still companies like factories where they have major equipment and that's, their most valuable asset. Or here with real estate, sometimes real estate investors' most valuable asset will be the real estate, right? That's totally fair. But if you want to do something with that, it's more about, as a company anyway, it's more about your intellectual property. And so that's just such a broad term that it can include your contacts, right? Your internal contacts. It can include your marketing strategy. How do you have like an email campaign, like how are you attracting people? Most of the time that's through intellectual property.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense what you just said at the beginning too. I don't know how many people I've seen, well, not a lot, but I've seen quite a few people that I know get into business together. They, like you said, we're gonna crush it, man. We're gonna kill it, this and that, and I've almost done that personally. I think I was smart enough where I have a dad that tells me, no, don't get into business with her, so, but majority of the time, I mean, sometimes it works, but a lot of the times it doesn't, because once you really start making money or you don't make money, and people butt heads. It's gonna happen. You're not the same person. You're not, and you have your opinion, and then somebody else has their opinion, and without any legal stuff up front, things are going to change, and one person's going to get screwed, the other person probably isn't, or it could be both. It's just there's a lot of factors that go into it, and once again, said this multiple times, people don't think about this stuff. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and the cost up front to get yourself protected is so much smaller than having one dispute, right? I mean, the numbers are going to vary, right? But you're not going to have a lawsuit under 10 grand. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, no, spot on. So obviously, me and you talked about this a little bit before we started, but obviously the show's kind of directed towards more real estate and construction, but also I have a lot of business owners that do listen to this show. So this is very, very helpful. And most people buying real estate and building houses are, in business as well. So what about real estate and home building? What do you recommend people dealing with homes do for legal representation, whether it's buying, building, selling, renting? What do you think?
So contracts is super important. Now I actually represent a few realtors, and whether realtors realize it or not, they are building a brand. Even if it's underneath a bigger company, they have a brand, and it could be associated with them as an individual and their individual name. Or a lot of realtors now are taking a more modern approach and creating, different name and different branding that way. And some of them have podcasts, So they're doing different things. Realtors need to protect their brands the same way any other business does, right? They're essentially business owners, even if they're working under a broker, big company. So that's super important. In any, contracts, again, like I said, if you're renting, you want to know what your contract says. Like I'm renting currently, and I make sure that there's a 60-day out clause in my contract, because if I want to buy, I don't want to be stuck in this lease, right? So you can negotiate that. You can talk to your, future landlord, and you can get an attorney to do it too if you're not sure what you need to do, right? And please do not use LegalZoom. Please, I'd rather you do it on your own. If you're not going to hire an attorney, then hire LegalZoom. Okay. So just, that's a little side note there. But then, there's some business owners here who might be owners of communities, right? And they have realtors in-house selling off some of those houses. And a lot of times they have commission-based contracts in there. I would recommend to those people to make sure it's clear, make sure you're defining when somebody is owed commission and how much exactly, how to calculate it. Be very specific, because if one of these realtors gets fired or they leave early, but maybe the closing's the next day, what happens if you fire somebody the day before closing that they've secured, right? Who do they get paid? Well, if they don't get paid and you don't have that clearly defined, you might be hit with the demand letter or even a lawsuit trying to get that commission. So I would say, make sure that your contract is super clear in that situation as well.
Yeah, and all that's great too. And brushing on your first one too with the branding thing, because obviously I'm intrigued by it, because we are all our personal brand. We all have one. You have one, I have one, and it's just what you make of it. I mean, a lot of the older realtors, they just kind of have but believe it or not, they probably have their personal brand. They just don't do video. They don't do anything but newspaper advertising. But, it's just, if you have that modern day brand, it's smart. It is smart, because you just don't think about the stuff that you're talking about to actually protect it and think about the future on it. Because with social media and your growth behind social media, and thinking about it in this perspective too. So say you have a YouTube channel, or you have an Instagram account, and your Instagram blows up to, 1 million followers, for example, and you're not protected. Well, somebody can take that name and then what do you do? There's a million people following. It's just, they think about it that in depth too. Like YouTube channel, a lot of realtors are modern day realtors have YouTube channels now. Well, somebody can take that brand too, and then start their own, and then they own that brand and the rights to that. It's crazy just to think about.
Both of those examples that you've said, I know real life examples of that happening. So with the Instagram one, this woman, and I can't think of her name off the top of my head right now, but she's like in the spiritual healing realm, and she had thousands, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, but she did not have her trademark registered. Somebody hacked her account and took her name and then, wiped it clean. And unfortunately, a hacker is a different story, but she would have been able to at least get her name back if she had the trademark registered. She wouldn't have been able to get all her content back because the hacker wiped it, but at least there'd be protection to get your name. So when people are saying, I haven't seen anything from her lately, they can look her up. But she had to change the name, and she's rebuilt, and that's all great, but it's a real life situation. And then your other example about like real estate agents on YouTube, literally I have a client who has this issue, and he didn't get his name registered, and then subsequently somebody else registered the same name, and it's a little bit different. The name is the same, but what they do is a little bit different. But either way, now my client is exposed, right? Like they're still doing it. They're still going forward and using that YouTube channel, but they are at risk of this other company could come back at any moment and say, stop. And they can also seek damages. It's not just about stopping. It's saying, you're using our name and now we have damages that you owe us for, right? So there's a lot of risk there, but
yeah, big time.
So it's funny. Your examples are actually really legitimate and a real possibility.
Yeah, it's crazy because I know people that have YouTube channels. I mean, they're at like 4,000 followers right now, but as their follow count keeps growing, they're still not even thinking about what you're talking about, and they should already covered it too. I mean, that's the thing. Like, even with like my podcast, it's nowhere near like, let's say, an Ed Milet's or Andy Frisella's following, or one of those guys that have huge followings. But eventually, as it keeps growing too, it's something you can't consider too late, because somebody can just take that name and that brand and say, oh, this is me, I'm switching, and it's crazy to think about too, because you never think about it. I've said it multiple times.
I will throw out another quick piece of advice for those people who might be starting a brand, rebranding, adding on to their brand, whatever. If they're choosing a name, you want to avoid things that are generic or descriptive, because that's considered a weak mark, and you cannot protect generic names. You can protect descriptive names in some instances, but descriptive is like when it describes a feature or an ingredient or the actual product themselves, right? So you can get on what's called the supplemental register, and I'm not going to dive too deep, but if you are thinking about naming, try to be unique, and the more arbitrary or fanciful you can get, the better.
Yeah. So quick question too on that point. So basically, if my brand is, Bill Ryman, your broker builder, my Instagram's I'm Bill Ryman, because Bill Ryman was taken. So say I trademark Bill Ryman, can I take the Bill Ryman Instagram name from the person that's currently using it?
That is a good question. Probably yes. But that's hard when it's an individual's name, right? There's still the benefit. Okay, if this other guy named Bill Ryman was a builder or a realtor,
yeah, he's not. I think he's a younger person that just posts party pictures and.
Well, if he was doing the real estate stuff, you could definitely take it. If in this instance, I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, whether Instagram would give up that name for you.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
If it's a business name, for sure, but I'm not sure about that one. That's a great question.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out too, because I'm sure there's other people that are building brands and have built their businesses further, and then they're going on Instagram to keep building that brand, but then they have to do their name underscore then their last name because somebody else has it that, isn't really utilizing it in a business, but good for them. They had it first. It is what it is, kind of. But, you kind of, it was one thing I was just thinking because.
That's a really great question. I need to do some research.
Yeah. Let me know on that one for sure. So you say you make the process convenient and simple without compromising the quality and thoroughness of your services. How can you make the legal process easier or better for a client? What are you doing?
So a lot of our clients are entrepreneurs, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the clients are, and they're busy. Entrepreneurs are busy. So we are set up to work completely virtually. Clients don't have to come in if they don't want to. If they're local, they can. We have an office and everything to meet. But it's fully functional to do everything remotely. And we also focus on having a more approachable side, a more relatable aspect. Like going to see a lawyer doesn't have to be this intimidating, scary process. So we try to keep it simple, right? We get the information that we need from you. And then other than that, we don't need to sit down and have these, constant calls about the situation. We'll give you updates. We'll answer any questions that you have, but it's pretty streamlined the way that we handle it. And you don't have to, take a couple hours of your day to like drive to downtown and find parking and meet. And, if that's what you're looking for and you like that, you want to have all the people in suits ready to, offer you drinks and coffee, and you come in and you make a big day of it, great, then I'm not the attorney for you. But what I find is that most entrepreneurs just want it simple. Don't have to worry about it. Give me the information done off. It's, off my to-do list.
Well,
So we do that.
Yeah, no, and that's you're spot on with that, because if you think about it too, who wants to drive all the way downtown, go and go sit in an attorney's office and talk to an attorney? First of all, you're paying for that, hourly, because most attorneys are hourly. And second of all, nobody wants to waste that time doing that and then be on the phone with you also. By you streamlining everything online, it's 10 times better. It's a more modern approach. I highly agree with it, because if somebody's on the phone with you too, I'm sure you're charging for your time. That's usually how it should be anyway. But, if you can streamline a lot, make the process faster, and so everybody knows what they're getting too, and you're upfront with that, it's a big difference as far as what you're doing.
Yeah. So like our intake form and our representation agreement, it all can be done from your smartphone. Same for the payment. And oh gosh, I lost my train of thought. You just touched on, flat fees. We do flat fees too. Almost everything we do is flat fee, unless there's a situation where there's a lot of unknowns and we can't, price it out. So that's another way that it's like, I think people want to know what they're getting, how much they're paying. They don't want surprise costs. So yeah.
No, yeah, which is awesome, because like I said, most people, their interpretation of an attorney is I'm paying hourly, and I've seen in the past, I had this brilliant idea in the past for an app, and yeah, one of those brilliant ideas that I wasted money on. But I saw an attorney to talk to her. It was $500 per hour, and I was just like, what am I doing? Am I really spending this kind of money? I'm not even sure I'm doing this. And I was intimidated right off the bat when I heard $500 an hour, and I'm just like, oh man. So what you're doing is awesome too. It's definitely better to be upfront, and especially in your business too, and in any business. And I talk about it every single time on this show, but that's one thing mentally that comes to mind with attorneys is the hourly fees. So
yeah. And so what we do too is offer 15-minute discovery calls, because if you come to me and you're like, I have this idea, I mean, I should be able to tell you in that 15 minutes whether this is something you need to pursue, how much money it's going to cost you. A lot of people come to me and they say, oh, I need a patent. Well, most of the time they don't need a patent, or they don't qualify for a patent. Or maybe they need a trademark instead. But so we have this 15-minute call at no charge, just to weed that out for both parties. You don't need to pay me $500 for me to tell you what you're doing isn't plausible, right?
That's the thing, and I think that attorney kept me there talking about my idea for the hour just so I would pay her that $500. I did pay her the $500, so it never did that idea. That was one of the life experiences too. Right there. But anyway, brushing on that a little bit. So what things are you doing to stand out? From obviously there's probably a ton of attorneys in your area, Tampa being as big as it is, and St. Pete and Clearwater, all that. So what are you doing to stand out from the rest of them?
I mentioned, that we're virtually equipped. So that's one of the
Yeah.
things that we do. And I'm able to represent clients all over the country because trademark law is federal. So I get to work with people outside my area as well, like my geographical area. And I combine my personal brand with my business brand. So, DiAngelo Law has an image in itself, but then I'm pretty much the face of it, me as Erica DiAngelo. And I incorporate some of my more passionate side of entrepreneurship and mindset and empowerment with my legal side, which is here's all the legal stuff that you need to do to protect and grow your brand. So I think that's different than a lot of attorneys, even business or IP attorneys as well. And I incorporate some wow factor into my practice. So when clients hire me, sometimes they get a little gift just to say thank you. Not, it's not supposed to be intended as a, fee splitting or anything like that. But, and then, throughout the process, I do a lot of handwritten thank you notes, just some non-traditional things to make the experience feel special, but still convenient. And then my marketing's a little bit different too. I use a lot of social media. I'm going to be launching my podcast here in the next couple months. I don't do, ads on the newspaper, on TV, or on billboards. So I think it's kind of a new modern approach to things. And again, like, I'm not sitting here touting myself in a suit and trying to put on this facade. I'm a professional and I deliver professional quality work, but I'm also a human and an entrepreneur, just like my clients.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, and you go above and beyond, hands down, and that's the thing. And doing the handwritten notes, it's a great touch. I do that as well. And also, not and you establishing your brand as not not the typical attorney in the suit, and and just you're you, and that's what you're trying to do. And then being on social media, how many attorneys I never see any on social media, so that's a huge thing to be doing. And plus all the stuff I talked about at the beginning of the show and the appearances that you've made just to get in front of a camera too and talk about what you're doing and how important it is and speaking to younger people about it too. It's only going to build you and your brand and your business. And that. So preaching to the choir here with you. So, what would you recommend builders do to help customers select the right attorney based on quality and not price, or people, I should say, not just builders?
I would start by not looking at the price tag, right? I would just ignore the price tag, see what is this attorney going to offer me. If you're going to consult with more than one attorney, who do you really trust? And I've gotten asked this question verbatim: do you price match? No, I am not Walmart. This is not Best Buy. These are how much my services cost. Okay. So if you decide that you wanted me as your attorney, but somebody else is charging less, well, why is it that you were comfortable with me to begin with? Don't you want that peace of mind that that your attorney is going to be doing the right job? So I would say ignore the price at first and then look, well, is it reasonable? Do I think this person who's way less is going to do the job that I need? Is this person way overcharging? I know an attorney who charges $10,000 for a trademark. I don't know what he's doing. That's so different from me, but I think that's outrageous, right? I think it's outrageous. So yeah, when you're comparing, if there's an astronomical difference, that's a concern. If the difference is small and you trust one, I would say go with that one. And as far as figuring out how to trust them, check out their content. What are they talking about? Are they talking about the issues that are related to your needs. Do they have experience in this industry? Or if maybe sometimes there's things where nobody has experience, like, when the farm bill passed and like the hemp laws changed and everything, there was nobody who was an expert in that industry, but there are still people who talk about it. So they have, passions for it, and they have skill sets that can transfer over there. So just see, where's their experience, where's their focus in their content, and hopefully they're putting out content. I think that's really important in today's age, right? We have the internet. It's a gift. You can put out all this stuff, any given moment. So that's how you can show off your expertise.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, and that's the thing. Putting out content's kind of a way for people to initially figure out who you are, and they can initially judge if they want to be with you or not right off the bat, because they learn who the person you are right away from your video and so on. So if they're not going to connect with you, it kind of weans out the people that you shouldn't be working with anyway. That's exactly what it's all about. But the stuff that you're doing too, it's the same as every business, and I always like to ask this question because I like to get the opinions of every business, and everybody kind of says the same thing. Being based on quality and not prices, it's you're going to deal with people constantly. Can you price match this, or why are you more than this guy, or why? And you have to explain yourself, yes, and take the time to explain yourself. But if people don't see the difference in quality and they're just looking at the number overall, then those aren't people you want to work with anyway, because more than likely it's not going to work out too well. So and you're not going to get along. So, and I deal with that a lot in building constantly, where I get questioned, well, why is this and this and that, why are you different from him and this and that? Well, if you're not seeing that after I just took you through a house and pointed out every little detail that we are different with, then I don't want to work with you, because that's, we have a brand as a builder, we have a reputation just like you do as an attorney. We build a good product, we have good customer service, and you're either with us because of us, and we're going to retain that relationship with you. And I've been telling people that too. I go, if you're looking at price, I'm not your guy. But if you're looking for a relationship after the fact with the build, that's what we specialize in, better than anybody else, on top of our quality, which every builder says they build a quality house, but I can show you the difference in quality versus everybody else. So if you like that, then you can go with us. If not, and you're just thinking numbers, go with the other guy, because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. Time's obviously valuable. So
I feel the same way. Yeah. It's funny. Have you defined your client avatar?
What do you mean by that?
Like your ideal client?
Oh, yeah. No, I haven't done that. No.
Oh, okay. So like some, businesses will define their client avatar. They get so specific that they even have a name and all this stuff. But
oh, really?
What I find, interesting when I think about that for mine, and I don't have an official avatar for mine, but when I think about it, it's more about the mindset. Are these people who are valuing investing into themselves and into the right people, or is this somebody who has a mindset of like, well, I'm gonna nickel and dime make the situation unpleasant just to save a buck, right? So it's not necessarily defining this person as a demographic standpoint. It's like, what kind of mentality do you have? And one of the biggest, quickest red flags is like, trying to lower your price,
No, I just had that happen. Actually yesterday, I just had that happen. I was working a deal with a guy. It was just little give and take here and there. I'm just like, all right, come on. And it was a cost plus agreement too. And there's all this little give and take that kept being asked for. And it was almost like, and I kept getting confused with the situation, because I'd think we'd have the deal done and then he'd come back and do something else. So then I started realizing, I'm like, all right, this is just getting more back into nickel and dime, how much money he can save on the back end on a cost plus contract. And then he said, a cost plus not to exceed, which in custom building, that is not a fair deal to the custom builder. You being an attorney, I talked to our attorney on that one. And he's like, no, like you're gonna end up losing money. So after I figured all this out, I emailed him nicely, and I was just like, yeah, this is we can't do it. It's going to be cost plus at our percentage. We already lowered our percentage with you, and I'm giving you this, this, and this at a cap without tacking on that extra percentage. That's a really fair deal. The guy just responded back, I was under the impression it was cost plus not to exceed the whole time. Or he goes, that's unfortunate. That's all he responded back. So I didn't even respond, after that email. I knew what he was doing, and he was trying to get the best deal. He's probably doing it to a couple other builders too. And, that was it. And so, I mean, you run into that stuff all the time. And the problem with the industry, and you deal with it too, I'm sure in yours, is that you spend so much time with these people that you do want the deal because all the time that you're putting into it, and then all of a sudden, just like that, it's over and they go somewhere else, So,
Yeah, that's frustrating, and it's so inconsiderate, It's like, that's one of my biggest pet peeves is people who are inconsiderate and who waste my time. Like, do you want other people wasting your time? I mean, just, be considerate. But
because they're in
and then
business.
you do get to that point too, where it's like, oh, but I've already invested this time. Maybe I should just take on this client, even though I know they're going to be a problem. But
yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, it's kind of at that point, it's almost a lose-lose. So then you just kind of have to bite the bullet, say we're not meant to work with each other, and that time that I invested in them, it's in the past. Yeah, I could have put that into somebody else, but there's always people that are going to come around, as you know too, that you're going to work well with, you're going to get along with, and then it's going to be a much better relationship for both, and it's going to benefit you in the end too, because they'll probably write a nice review, and you'll get more business and referral business. So positive outlook, right? So let's dive deeper into the process. What should attorney do to guide customers throughout the process to help avoid unwanted surprises?
So every attorney is a little bit different, and each reason you would see an attorney is a little bit different. I try to give my clients expectations up front. Like I said, the trademark process is a lengthy process. So I tell them how long they're going to wait, right? If it's a contract, I draft a contract, but then I walk them through it, explaining what it means so that they aren't accidentally breaching it, or sometimes they could misuse it. Sometimes people don't understand the difference between like a non-compete, non-disclosure, confidentiality agreement, right? And when the appropriate time is to use it. So I explain that as well, when they should be using it and what it means. So things like that are super important. I would say that question really depends on the type of law and the type of situation that you're in. And that's also another reason why I use flat fees, because I want to manage client expectations. And I'm a business owner and a consumer, and I've hired attorneys myself, and I've hired marketing companies, and I hire all this. And I know it's really frustrating when you're forking over this money. You kind of want security, right? You like want to know that, okay, this is how much it costs, and then that's that.
No, like I said before too, I agree, because a lot of it is a mystery with attorneys and stuff like that. You don't know the upfront cost because they're like, well, our hourly is this, but we don't know. We can't really predict what you're gonna. I mean, I've dealt with it too, and everything's kind of a question mark in the end, and not so much in my real estate transactions, but in other stuff too. And it's what you're doing is definitely, I commend you on it. It's the right way of doing it. More people should do it, because that's what world we're in, is people just want to know. They want to get to the point. They don't want to beat around the bush. They want to know what's expected, and that's what you're doing. So commend you on that one.
I appreciate it.
So personal brand is very important, and I wanted to get into this a little bit too, because I'm so interested in what we talked about this is, I personally have one with your broker builder. So how can I or somebody else protect their personal brand? What's the best ways? I know you brushed on this, but I just want to dive deeper into it for the audience, because like I said, I got a lot of people that are building brands and stuff that listen too, and this is pretty big.
For sure. Yeah. So when you're building a personal brand, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do from the branding side. And for that, I would recommend talking with an actual branding expert, you know, in the marketing side of branding. But from the legal side, you can trademark your name. And there's, you know, I know that sounds kind of silly to some people. Why would I want to trademark my name? It's my name. Nobody can take that from me. Well, nobody's going to be able to make you change your name. But if you're in an industry, whatever the industry is, and there's somebody else with the same name, which can happen, then you're exposing yourself to, you know, consumer confusion. And in the event that you're a personal brand and you are forced to somehow, you know, rebrand or change that, or, you know, focus on your business brand name rather than your personal brand name, I mean, that's even worse in a lot of instances than having to rebrand your business name, because people are associating everything with you as an individual. So, you know, just I think trademarks is the biggest way to do that. Everything else is kind of the same as growing a business brand, like a business name brand rather than a personal brand. I'm using the term business brand to distinguish from the term personal brand. It's all very similar. I would say the biggest differentiator with personal brand would be the way that you're actually branding yourself and the things that you're doing in that way. If you're on social media and you're posting a lot of content, you want to make sure that your content that's yours is protected and you're not accidentally infringing on others too, right? Because you don't want to end up unintentionally infringing on somebody and then hit with damages and lawsuit and all that jazz. I actually just did a webinar on this called Combating Copycats, and we talked a lot about your personal brand, and it was twofold. It's one, you don't want people copying you and your, you know, knowledge and your name and your likeness, but you also don't want to accidentally be the copycat, because that exposes you to potential liability. Yeah, and so a lot of things that people are doing right now, personal brands, are like creating ebooks. If you're creating an ebook, you want to make sure you're putting the copyright notice at the bottom. Like the second you create a book, you own the copyright. You know, you have some copyright laws, I should say, protection there. But if you put the copyright notice at the bottom, you put people on notice. You know, that's one way to do it. People can never copy your brain, right? So like when you're a personal brand, what makes you unique is you and the way that you do things, the way that you say things. So when somebody tries to approach you, like somebody can copy your content all day, but when it's time to do business and you're like face to face or one-on-one, that person's not gonna be able to replicate you. Yeah. So that's why I say, you know, it's more in that sense important to focus on the branding.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it too. And yeah, the trademarking. So, I mean, you brushed on it too. So basically, whoever has a brand, you have a brand logo, call an attorney, get it trademarked. It'll probably take 8 months to a year. And then nobody will be able to use that brand or that name. Then possibly I'll be able to get Bill Ryman on Instagram too. So.
Yes. And then you want to monitor it too, because if people start using your brand name, even after you get it trademark registered, you're not doing anything to enforce it, you could potentially lose it. So you want to make sure that you're sending out the cease and desist when somebody's infringing. And remember, a lot of times it's not intentional. So don't be a trademark bully, but, you know, protect yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Great information. So let's go into you personally. I've been asking this question to everybody on my show, very important, and everybody's answered it different. So you have built an amazing company and brand that continues to grow every day. What lessons have you learned throughout your journey that we should all apply to our own business or lives that can help us grow?
That is a great question, and it's so hard to narrow down. I would say for me, it's probably about consistency and prioritization. So I kind of have an entrepreneurial brain where there's a million things firing all at once and I want everything done right this second. And that's obviously not possible. So I find myself starting on one project and starting on the next and then not finishing them.
Mm-hmm.
So, this was something that was hindering my business growth for a while. And then I started time blocking actually, and I started brain dumping like all my to-do lists and then putting them in an order of priority and really making sure that I'm doing something to completion. And that doesn't mean I don't start multiple projects simultaneously and work on them a little bit at a time, but I make sure that I'm actually getting through what I need to get through. And when it feels like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for so long, why am I not making more money? And why am I not where I want to be? Because I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, that people with big dreams, like we want to be there yesterday. But I try to take the time to look back at how far I've come, 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and just remind myself like that it's a journey and it's a process and doesn't happen overnight. And then I just need to continue with my consistency and making sure that I'm managing my time and prioritizing things appropriately.
Yeah, great answer on that too, because I'm exactly the same way as far as my mind too. Like I'll start one thing, then I'll go to the next, then I'm all scrambled all over, and especially during the day when you're getting hit from all different directions too. Somebody's calling you, you get distracted, they're asking for something, so you pull off of that. So, I mean, the time blocking thing is something I definitely need to consider too, personally, because being in two different industries, real estate and construction, it's like nonstop too. And then I'm going to do this and I got to run to a job and do that. It's crazy. So that's one thing I'm definitely going to implement too, because I got the same mind where I'm just like, I need to stay
And
somewhere.
your industry and my industry too, like things come up that have to be dealt with now. But I try to, so for example, like I have client consultations, people can get onto my Calendly calendar on their own, right? And then for a while I was just having people at all different times and like, this doesn't make sense. Like by the time I got momentum doing one thing, I'm interrupted with this call for the next or whatever. So I even started time blocking like wiggle room time, right?
Yeah.
So when the things that do come up, I have that in there where I can step away and make sure it's getting done,
No, yeah, I definitely need to do something like that too, because yeah, you can drive yourself crazy, that's for sure, especially when things really get busy too, and I'm sure you're really big, because we're seasonal down here. It's probably the same where you are too. So there's more people in the area now, and it's like nonstop. So yeah, that was a great answer too. So I also like to do this too. Most people ask about your past and like I did at first, or I ask who you are and so on. So I I like to ask, what are your plans for the future, whether it's business or life? Where will we see Erica DiAngelo in the future? Who will you be?
Oh, Erica DiAngelo will be on more stages and more platforms, educating entrepreneurs, not only about the legal concerns of starting and running a business, but also more about entrepreneurship, empowerment, and mindset. And like I mentioned, I am launching my podcast. I'm narrowing down a date this weekend, but probably in May 2020. So if I don't know when you're going to be listening to this podcast, but it might already be out. It's called Make a Seat. So that'll be there. And for my personal life, I mean, I plan on sticking to Florida. Can't beat the weather.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
That's it. Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Tampa, St. Pete, somewhere near this area. I haven't decided. It's a weird place because Tampa's actually not on the beach, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I kind of want to be near the water, but that's exactly
there
where.
You go. Good answer. So last question I like to ask everybody too is and that's what the show is all about, is what exactly do people need to look for when hiring an attorney, and why should they choose Erica DiAngelo as their attorney of choice?
All right. Well, you should choose Erica as your attorney if you want a proactive approach to, you're protecting your business. And if you want to work with somebody who can handle your work remotely and isn't concerned about suits and, you know, whining and dining and all that stuff. Okay. I'm not the right attorney for everybody, to be honest. If you already screwed yourself over and you want to dig yourself out of a hole for a breach of contract, you should probably not hire me. You should probably hire an attorney whose main focus is breach of contract disputes, somebody who talks about that either on their website or LinkedIn or, you know, wherever their outlet of choice is. I would say to, you know, check the reviews online, like I said, but I would, or I didn't say that, but I was thinking it. But I would say take it with a grain of salt too. I mean, if you're a business owner, especially, you know that sometimes no matter what you do, you can't please certain clients. So I would read what it actually says and take that into consideration more than the number of stars. Yeah, and I think that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. No, Erica, this has been awesome. And it was definitely a topic that I learned a lot from too. And I'm sure everybody that's listening has learned a ton too. I mean, it's a ton of value you just gave. And thank you once again for coming on too and taking the time. I know you're busy. Last thing, where can people find and connect with you?
They can connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. All my handles are at DiAngelo Law, or you can email me, erica@diangelolaw.com. And if you have any questions, like I said, I do the free 15-minute discovery calls. So contact me and we can set something up.
Awesome. Yeah. And definitely check out that podcast in May 2020. And like I told you, you just got to do it. So, you know, that's just launch it. Like we talked about, but no, I really appreciate you coming on, taking the time. This was great. Great information too on a subject that I really wanted to learn more about. And I'm sure everybody else did too. So with that being said, thanks guys for listening and I'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.